Thank you for joining us on the Media Connection. I'm Naima Latif, and we are here at the 52nd annual Jalsa Salana of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. We're here in the United Kingdom, and this has been a fantastic event, a global gathering of individuals who are pledging their lives to a lifestyle of peace and harmony. And I'm here with Aisha Malik.
That's right.
Who is running the press tent here. And we have had an opportunity to see some amazing things here, hear some wonderful speeches, and meet men and women from all across the world. And of course, the dynamic women who handle the business here are just really awesome. So thank you so much for
Thank you very much for your kind words
today. Yes.
and for having me.
Well, tell us a bit about how, first of all, your background, how you happened to become Muslim. Were you born Muslim or converted?
Yes.
And what's been your experience here in the United Kingdom?
So I was born and raised in Pakistan, and I was born into a Muslim family. I was a born MD Muslim, and I spent 26 years in my home country, and I only left it for 1 year when I went to the United States for a master's in law, and after which I went back to Pakistan and worked in a commercial litigation firm. After which I was whisked away by the man I married.
That's a good reason to be whisked away.
And we lived briefly in the Middle East and Paris, and then we moved to the UK to start a family. And we've been in the UK for 4 years now, and obviously in the last 10 years our world has changed.
Yes.
Being a Muslim woman means something different, and I would say in the last 5 years the rhetoric around Muslim women and Muslims in general is changing increasingly. And so I think what we do in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and within the Ahmadiyya Muslim Women's Association is becoming even more important, as far as I'm concerned, importantly as a visible Muslim.
Yes.
Living in Western lands, that we continue to do the outreach and bringing together of diverse peoples and cultures to events such as Jalsa Salana, where they can experience positive engagement at the grassroots and learn about what Muslim women get on with in their everyday lives. And that is why this event is so special.
Well, you mentioned being a visible Muslim, which of course does make a difference. I've even experienced the different attitudes at airports. You know, if I happen to have a piece of cloth on my head, but somehow that has such a significant meaning to people who've been indoctrinated to fear the symbol of Islam. So, as someone who's, born, raised in a Muslim country, how have you seen the difference in a Western nation, and how would you say the attitudes have changed over the last few years toward Islam?
I think that the turning point was 9/11, and I think that was cemented by the rise of social media. You know, this convenience space where people don't have to make themselves visible, where it gave them a license to voice their views in particularly not what one would say democratic discourse or civilized discourse, or discourse that really helps build bridges. Obviously, I'm not denying that social media has had a very positive impact in the world and it's changed our world in good ways. But unfortunately, I think it's also changed our world in dividing people a lot. And I think, when you sit down together like we are now and have a conversation, that's how like I said, building bridges happens in platforms such as this. And I think today we face a reality as Muslim women where increasingly the shift is to not bring together, but to steer away. Now I think when you say I'm a visibly Muslim woman, I think I feel increasingly patronized all the time by the emphasis on the piece of cloth, like you say, on my head, rather than looking inside and seeing what has Aisha got to contribute to society. Now it may not be much, but certainly every Muslim woman is an individual entity.
Yeah.
And when you focus your emphasis entirely on what that entity places on their head or what they choose to wear, you completely discard the fact that that individual entity is a person with
Yes.
something to give.
Yes.
And I think that is where we need to reshift our energies. And this is what we try and emphasize, particularly at Jalsa Salana, because we host such a big audience. But increasingly at every day, in our daily lives, putting up events, bringing together seminars, interfaith seminars, outreach events, just to tell people or give people a chance to come and interact with Muslim women. Because where we sit today in the Hampshire countryside, you'd be surprised, like a lot of English families around the area have never met Muslim women.
Wow.
Never met a Muslim family before. So it is their opportunity to interact and find out. But it also tells us how important it is to reach out and not let just the online tablet or television screen shape our perceptions, because like I said, there are countless people out there who have had very little or no interaction with Muslims whatsoever, and their perceptions are being shaped by the information they get in the news. And for me as a Muslim woman, I think that's the single most important thing, is to cut through that somehow, through other efforts on the ground.
Yes. I know that it was a big story that came out about when Saudi Arabian women got the right to drive. It's years, for years they've not been able to drive. Women had to have a male driver.
Yes.
And that tends to be the perception that people have, that Muslim women are not allowed outside or to function. But you have a law background, so naturally, you're a professional woman.
Yes.
What are some of the ways that you have I guess, worked in the various professional fields, and how has being a Muslim woman impacted that?
So it's an interesting question. I have a few. I think that your question touches on a few interesting angles, and if I may, I'd like to respond on all those angles.
Yeah.
You mentioned Saudi Arabia, and I think it's fascinating. It captures the imagination of the entire world in different ways, good and bad, I suppose. And I think the right to drive is ironic, because back in the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, women, were on horseback. They partake in, combat. They took care of the wounded soldiers.
Yeah.
So really, when I hear this history of the right to drive, I feel like, people forget history and where we came from. Unfortunately, there's one problem that the Muslim majority world today, unfortunately, has gone quite far away from the original teachings, and religion has used governments in Muslim majority countries such as Pakistan and elsewhere, have used religion as a political tool. And that has meant that now the practice of religion, state-sponsored and otherwise, is not an accurate reflection of the religion itself. So that's one thing, and that's increasingly what we see in Saudi Arabia, even though it was the home of, the birth of Islam. And that is very, I suppose, for every Muslim, is very sad. But it also makes your task even more important, more urgent, that you tell people that. It also puts an onus on the people to be better listeners. Sometimes I feel like we're shouting, but no one's listening.
Yes.
Or they want to tell a story that people want to hear, and necessarily not the story you want people to hear.
Yes.
So that's one thing. But the other part of the question is how I've worked in Muslim majority country. I've worked as a teacher, and I've worked as a practitioner in a law firm. And I think the only angle I've experienced, I could say something interesting, is in a Muslim country, being a Muslim woman has, you're of no consequence, but from the perspective of an Ahmadiyya Muslim woman living in a country which persecutes Ahmadiyya Muslims, that might be an interesting place, because we do experience state sanctioned persecution in Pakistan on various levels. Pakistan is the only country to have a constitutional definition of who is a Muslim. Ahmadis have basic human rights are denied. We cannot use the Islamic salutation of peace. We can't call our places of worship mosques. So much so that in 1993, the Pakistani Supreme Court came out with a judgment which said that certain things are the intellectual property of Islam, and so Ahmadis are denied that. We had an anti-Ahmadi ordinance come out, which now forms part of the blasphemy laws, which makes certain things punishable even by death, or life imprisonment. So from that angle, I can say that living in Pakistan as an Ahmadi Muslim has its challenges. And I feel fortunate when people ask me in the UK what it feels like to be a Muslim woman. Sure, it has its challenges in the West, given that we live in a polarized world, but it's nothing close to what Ahmadi Muslim women or Muslim women sometimes have to face in general in places like Pakistan, where they're denied the basic freedom to live their lives freely, to choose their religion freely, practice their religion freely. And I feel blessed that I'm now living in a country which allows me those things. But I also feel an increasing responsibility to do something that makes our life, their lives, or the lives of others better, and do something that makes the world understand people better. Because I think if you have privilege or certain benefits, you must share. You must use that privilege for the betterment of mankind, because that's what gives life meaning.
Yes. I've heard a number of addresses here where the presenters and there are a number of prominent people now that are giving accolades to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for always being there during a disaster to help, through our organization Humanity First, and then also being the first to speak out against acts of terrorism. So the Ahmadiyya community has set an example and set a reputation of being a Muslim community that is exemplifying the peaceful side of Islam, the unifying aspects of Islam, and yet the community has been under harsh criticism by other entities, and as a result, many have immigrated to other countries. So with immigration comes, bringing of culture, language, traditions. How have you been able to, I guess, integrate into the British society after coming from a Muslim country and having so many different things that happen that are not necessarily acceptable or promoted in an Islamic country?
It's an interesting question, Naima. I think when, again, it boils down to how people are fed things about certain countries in the news. So, when people hear about Pakistan, I think a typical image comes to mind about women, maybe perhaps women in burqas only.
Yes, no bars where people drink or,
where technically alcohol is prohibited, but people, bootleggers about.
Yes.
And there's certain places you find alcohol. But we imagine women don't leave their homes. We are a complex family, and however, I feel like the home I was born into and the community I was born into, I had an unconventional upbringing. I was raised by a single Muslim headscarf-wearing mother who was a school teacher. She worked in a private school chain in the capital. And then she opened her own school with two of her colleagues.
Oh my!
Yeah,
Wow.
And named it after a famous Arabic scholar called Ibn Khaldun. The school was called Khaldun High.
Wow!
And I did my GCSEs from there, and then I did my A-levels. And as you know, Pakistan being a former colony, we have the British Council.
Yeah.
You can go through the British speeches on stone. It's just your examinations are flown out to the UK. So in that sense, I had an unconventional upbringing. So people who would trickle into my home were my mother's friends mostly, who were all working women. Someone was working in the World Bank. Someone was, consultant. Someone was. So I got, in that sense, an unconventional upbringing. When I was only 12 years old, 13 years old, pardon me, I was one of the youngest members in an NGO, one of their youngest general body members, which was called Women's Action Forum. So we would go out, and every year on the 8th of March, we would get hold of our candles, and we had the main artery that ran through the capital, and if we marched all the way down, we would hit the Parliament House there. So we would, pick up our candles, and we would go do the march, do the vigil all the way to Parliament House, carrying our slogans. And I've worked with rape and burn victims and victims of domestic violence. So in that sense, I got an unconventional upbringing. So coming to this country, it just meant changing a geographic location, because the mindset and the values I was raised with were essentially the same. And it also didn't mean that I stepped on British soil for the first time. I had traveled abroad before. I had lived in the US. I had studied in the US. So it wasn't a cultural shock for me in that sense. But I think the needs had changed. I think as a Muslim woman, how you respond to circumstances, what is required of you, what is needed of you, those things have changed. But I think that I may have been prepped adequately.
Yes, you sound like you were surrounded by professional women, dynamic women who were making changes in the world, and so that kind of defined for you then what it means to be a woman.
Exactly. Yes. And the fact that they were mostly Muslim women.
Yes.
Just getting on with their daily lives, and, I think the most poignantly beautiful thing about Islam is, I think the single most important thing I tell the people when they, go down the equality route for men and women in Islam is that if you look at the commandment to seek knowledge in Islam, it's completely gender neutral.
That's right. Male or female, seek knowledge. Yes. And if I ask you, what is the single most robust way that you can empower a woman? Is give her a good education. That's right.
That's it. She doesn't need wealth. She doesn't need anything else.
She can get everything if she just has knowledge.
The opportunity for a good education goes such a long way.
Yeah.
And that will give her financial independence, and naturally all the other things will follow suit. She will be well aware of her rights. She will be well aware of her, a self-respecting person, and that all comes with a good education. And there is no shortage of emphasis on good education. Absolutely. I think once again something worth remembering, and we don't hear much about it.
Right. Well, this was yesterday. We saw a large group of women receiving awards for academic excellence, which was very impressive. I saw many of them getting awards in science, technology, and all of that. So what do you see as the future of Muslim women and their impact on the world, perhaps in the fair treatment of women, the sensitivity of mothers? We talked about earlier, I had a conversation with a group of women about how countries are even providing things like maternity leave. In the United States, many places you get maybe 6 weeks off actually, and then you have to go back to work, whereas here, I believe it's a year's maternity leave.
My sister lives in the US, she had 2 weeks off.
Yes. Yeah. How do you have a baby, go back to work in 2 weeks? So those kinds of things where there needs to be more sensitivity that comes from being a woman, and means more women need to be influenced. So with the increasing number of women who are in the professional world, what do you see as the future in terms of perhaps a changing culture and a changing sensitivity for women and families in general as a result of more Muslim women being educated?
I think I like to keep having an optimistic view on this. And I think that the more women we will educate, eventually the better mothers they will become, and they will rear an educated next generation. And hopefully, I think very importantly, as a mother of two boys, I feel that I have an incredible burden to give my boys an upbringing that they turn out as respectful men, respecting of women. I think it's very important, because we think that you might educate your woman, but you can't expect her to go very far if she gets caught up in the vicious circle of perhaps a bad marriage or other obstacles along the way, which we do sadly hear about.
Yes.
It could be in the shape of fathers being conservative, husbands being conservative, sometimes even brothers being conservative. So unless mothers, Muslim educated mothers, rear educated, open-minded Muslim men,
Right.
who can provide good companionship and support.
Yes.
Because I sit here today because my husband is babysitting, or rather he hates babysitting, parenting my 19-month-old. And
that's impressive.
Who's been taking care of my children for 3 days. So
That
I
is
can
impressive.
get on with my work here. And
Yes.
you have to have that support system behind you.
You have to be a team.
So you can go and do your thing.
Yes.
So I feel like the education of women is very important, but also the education, good emotional intelligence building of men
Yes.
at the same time. Because when you talk headscarfing, Muslim women, I always remind people that if you read the Quran, the first references to Muslim men actually
Yes.
lower their
Lower
gaze.
the gaze. All right. First, don't look. Yeah.
So we have to make sure, and I take that on as a Muslim mom.
Yes.
We have to raise up Muslim men that can respect women and support them and treat them with kindness.
Yes, I think that is definitely key. Well, I certainly thank you for providing this insight. I've been very impressed with the work that the women have done. The women are the organizers, and the world needs more of us to participate in the process of transforming the world. So
Thank you very much for having me.
yes, but thank you for doing your part to change the world.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And I'm Naima Latif. We'll be right back in just a moment.